Hey everyone, welcome to the second floor NDTV studios in the Duncan Student Center. I'm Johnny Soper.
I'm John Horlander.
I'm Austin Rooney.
And this is Shamrock Sports.
Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight.
There's 5 in a row. That's a done pressure again. Loses the football. It's a takeaway for the Irish. And Julian Love is going to score the other way. A scoop and score. Williams turns the corner. Look out. Dexter Williams in a foot race. And they're running down. No. 98-yard touchdown.
And welcome back inside the second floor NDTV studios. We are happy to bring you Shamrock Sports on this Friday afternoon as Notre Dame prepares to take on the Pittsburgh Panthers. Fighting Irish coming at 6-0, ranked in the top 5 in America. And a big win over Virginia Tech last Saturday. Guys, what was the most impressive thing that Notre Dame did last Saturday at Lane Stadium?
Well, they scored a lot of points. I thought Ian Book looked really good yet again because this is now 3 games in a row we've seen Ian Book. We saw him play that first game versus Wake Forest. You know, he played well there. Then Stanford, and you could still say, okay, it's only been 2 games. But after the big win over Virginia Tech last week, I thought that it really solidifies him as somebody who can be trusted down the road as a big-time quarterback.
Yeah, I thought for me the most impressive thing was Notre Dame overcoming the environment, overcoming all of the hype and the talk and the noise surrounding that game, and coming out and just taking care of business. It took some adjustments in the second half, but
No doubt.
overall, I think top to bottom, it was a 4-quarter performance. The game, it required a full performance from Notre Dame and a big win to show for it.
Yeah, you and I were there, and we were talking with the Virginia Tech fans after, and they were all saying, well, it was a great first half. You know, we had them right where we wanted them. And we were both like, well, football's 4 quarters.
But at halftime, it felt like we were losing. I mean, we were up by 1, and Notre Dame had scored to make it 17-9 on that scoop and score from Julian Love.
Yep.
And then, you know, Julian Okwara gets ejected for targeting, and Virginia Tech goes down the field, scores a touchdown. It's a 1-point game at halftime.
And they had all the momentum.
And they get the ball to start the second half, and you're like, we have -2 rushing yards at halftime, and it was just, you know, a brutal first half. And you just got that feeling. You're like, it's one of those games. You're on the road. It's at night. We had how many difficulties, you know, getting into the stadium and getting our broadcast going. It felt like one of those nights. So much credit to this coaching staff. We don't say it enough. So much credit to Brian Kelly and that coaching staff for making the right adjustments in the second half and turning things around.
And you could tell that Notre Dame physically was more prepared to play in the second half than Virginia Tech was.
They were, and they showed it again right out of the gate, seeing Dexter Williams put up that incredible rush just a few minutes into that third quarter, and that was a huge momentum shift. Notre Dame went on top, and they never looked back after that huge 97-yard rush from Dexter Williams.
45-23 was the final score. Notre Dame is 6-0 and ranked number 5 in the AP Top 10 poll. And perhaps you were watching Notre Dame on Saturday and didn't catch the rest of the college football games. Caroline Pineda has the recap for you.
I'm Caroline Pineda, and here's what happened in college football this week. There was a big shakeup in the top 10 this week with the number 5, 7, and 8 teams all going down. First up, number 5 LSU traveled to Gainesville to face off against number 22 Florida. These teams traded scores in a close contest well into the fourth quarter, but the Gators opened up the biggest margin of the game with just 1:45 left on the clock to overpower LSU 27-19. Turning to the Red River rivalry in Dallas, number 7 Oklahoma and number 19 Texas were in a close one as well. The Longhorns went up 14 in the second quarter, but the Sooners cut the lead to 7 at the half. Texas took a 21-point lead entering the fourth quarter, but Heisman candidate Kyler Murray wasn't letting Oklahoma go down that easily. The Sooners scored 3 touchdowns in 8 minutes to tie the score at 45, but Texas freshman Cameron Dicker made a 40-yard field goal in the final seconds. That 48-45 win marks the Longhorns' 3rd victory over a ranked opponent this season, and it lifted them to number 9 in the rankings this week. In another top 10 upset from Week 6, Mississippi State controlled this game with number 8 Auburn from the second quarter, never even allowing a touchdown and pulling away 23-9. Week 7 will feature a few important conference matchups. First up in the SEC, number 2 Georgia will take on number 13 LSU. Meanwhile, in the Pac-12, there's another top 25 meeting between Washington and Oregon. And out of the Big Ten, number 12 Michigan will meet number 15 Wisconsin. That's what happened in college football this week. I'm Caroline Pineda. Let's get back to talking about the Irish.
All right, Caroline, thanks so much. Yeah, tons of important college football games this weekend, but let's go back to that Virginia Tech win for the Irish. Huge win for Notre Dame, and they exercised one of their demons that has haunted them from the past, which is going into road environments and getting smoked. Last Saturday, they proved that they can handle that.
They can. You're looking at one of the biggest environments in college football at Virginia Tech. It gets really loud in there. I wasn't there with you guys last weekend, but you could tell on television it was really loud, a huge environment playing in Virginia Tech. So I thought it was a big-time win for Notre Dame, especially playing in front of that huge crowd.
Yeah, and that you talked about it. Really, one of the things that has plagued Notre Dame's ability to move past a top 5, top 10 team and into a playoff contender has been that iconic road win, and they really got it against Virginia Tech. Although we're not really sure, I don't know how it stacks up. And you look back in the past, they traveled to Florida State, and Florida State was top 10. There was to Clemson the year Clemson made the college football playoff. To Miami last year, a Miami team that was set to go to the playoff where they got upset by Pittsburgh. So, I don't know how Virginia Tech stacks up against those games. It wasn't a top 10, top 5 road win, but I still think it was really impressive for Notre Dame on a personal level to go in there and take care of business and say, you know what, we can do this away from Notre Dame Stadium, and we can win on the road if it's not Wake Forest.
And it was a big win, but it was a banged-up Virginia Tech team who had lost their starting quarterback, whose best defensive end got dismissed from the team, and whose starting safety, best safety, and pass coverage man was injured during the week and couldn't play. So it certainly was a banged-up VT team that probably didn't deserve to be ranked in the top 25, especially after losing to Old Dominion. But still, Notre Dame went in, took care of business. It took 4 quarters, no questions, we talked about, but they took care of business.
They did. And this is the Virginia Tech team. You mentioned their loss to Old Dominion, but they had beaten Duke the previous week, and that's a top 25 team. That's a game on the road. They looked really, really good in that game. So I think that Virginia Tech probably deserved to be right around where they were, 22, 23, possibly stretching towards the top 20. But I thought Notre Dame overall played well. And no matter where Virginia Tech was ranked, it's a road game in a big-time road environment against a pretty good Virginia Tech team. You win by more than 3 touchdowns. It's not every day you're able to do that. I thought Notre Dame played pretty well on the whole front.
And Notre Dame's defense, especially without Khalid Kareem and without Dalen Hayes, and then with Julian Okora getting kicked out for the targeting penalty in the second quarter, really responded well. They only sacked Ryan Willis twice, and Willis went through the air a bunch. I mean, they couldn't really get anything going on the ground. 52 attempts for 309 yards, 1 touchdown, and then Julian Love had that interception. But Notre Dame's defense, I thought, played pretty well.
Yeah, I thought it did, and didn't allow a rushing touchdown. Really stayed firm on the ground, which is going to be important when we look at Pittsburgh coming up this weekend. And I really want to look at the matchups that Notre Dame had on the defensive front. They really struggled when they had 5 defensive backs on the field. Nick Coleman is a senior leader, a guy that was pegged to be one of the important defensive backs for Notre Dame this year. He's kind of been almost phased out a little bit, but you've got guys like Houston Griffith coming in. Troy Pride has stepped up in a big way at corner in the injury of Sean Crawford. But you look at Damon Hazelton, who is a very good wide receiver for Virginia Tech. 12 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. And he torched Notre Dame. And he consistently would match up with Troy Pride. And Pride would get beat. And multiple times we talked about this. Pride would say, hey, Julian Love, you need to come over here. You get Hazelton, I'll get Eric Kuma, and let's switch up these matchups a little bit. And then Damon Hazelton would just go in motion and go right back to attacking Troy Pride. So their game plan was definitely to attack some of the weaknesses in Notre Dame's secondary, which I think maybe won't come into play this weekend, but down the line, when they face a team like USC at the end of the year with JT Daniels and that very good quarterback, I think that Notre Dame's secondary is really going to need to find their identity. You look at Houston Griffith has allowed 13 receptions on 18 targets this year. So the Notre Dame secondary really needs to shore up, and Ryan Willis is a guy that could have exposed that, but a great job of the Notre Dame front 7 to keep pressure on him, forced a fumble, forced an interception, a good job of establishing their control.
Yeah, that nickel position is really a weakness for Notre Dame. When you look across the board, the Irish are a pretty balanced team, but if there's one bad spot, it's certainly that nickel position in the pass coverage.
It is, and Notre Dame overall has a pretty good defense. I mean, even if looking at the secondary, there are a lot of big pieces there for Notre Dame at the cornerback and safety positions, especially with Alohi Gilman this year. Big new piece for Notre Dame. And Again, and the front seven is pretty good on the whole front as well. A lot of those linebackers do a really good job of getting to the quarterback. So I think overall Notre Dame's defense is pretty strong, but it's not top 5. It's probably not top 10, but it's a defense that can compete with every team in the country.
It's not top 5 or top 10, but it actually is top 15 nationally in passing efficiency defense.
And according to S&P Plus, which is an advanced statistical metric, they are 5th in the country in defense. So it doesn't look pretty. It's very much bend but don't break.
It
but,
is. It very
you
much
look
is.
the guys that came in the absence of Hayes and after Ward's ejection. You had Asmir Bilal coming in at linebacker, giving some respite to Tranquil and Coney, and then you had Jameer Jones. You had both of the Ademiola brothers coming in. They really missed MTA, who hurt his foot. But I think that you look at the depth that Notre Dame's defense has, really, really looks good going forward.
Allowed 441 yards against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech actually got 6 more first downs than the Irish did, but a lot of that was because Notre Dame had the big plays, the 97-yard touchdown run and things like that, the soup and soar. Let's talk more about the second half adjustments, though, for the Irish. We talked about how at halftime it really did feel like they were losing, and Tech had all the momentum getting the ball back to start the second half, but the Irish quickly flipped that script with the big 97-yard run from Dex.
And it is so big to have a player on the team like Dexter Williams. There's no one else who's a running back this year or last year who could have done that 97-yard touchdown rush because no one else has that breakout speed. Dexter Williams is the only one.
That's true. Josh Adams last year a couple of times broke into the open field and couldn't finish the run.
That's right. And you look at somebody like Armstrong and Tony Jones Jr., they're good running backs. Those are guys who can put up over 100 yards of rushing in the game, but they're not going to put up a 97-yard touchdown run because they can't outrun those cornerbacks. And we saw it last game. It was clear Dexter Williams was able to do it, and he does it time. It was this close, but we see him do it time and time again. Yeah. He has these 35, 45-yard touchdown runs. He had to break out in those as well, and he does that every time, and he did it yet again with that 97-yard rush.
That was really a back-breaking play for Tech. Took the crowd right out of it. I mean, Notre Dame was 2nd and 12, backed up inside their own 5. The stadium is going nuts, and that just took all the air out of the room right there.
Yeah, and if you look at Notre Dame's drive summary in the first half, touchdown, field goal, things look good. And then you had a turnover on downs on that botched snap. Tyler Newsome, took the 17-yard loss. Another punt, and then they kneeled it at the end of the half. Second half, touchdown, punt, touchdown.
Yeah.
I'd
say that's pretty efficient.
That's exactly the type of efficiency you want to see on offense, especially in the second half, finishing out games. Something that Notre Dame struggled with early season. Not a lot of points in the fourth quarter in the second half. 28-7, an efficient beatdown in the second half.
Ian Book probably did not have his best game on Saturday. But even in his worst start of the year, just 3 starts, he was still had 178.
He was 271 yards.
There it is.
25 for 35, 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick.
Thank you for saving me there. I forgot to write the stat down there. On passes shorter than 20 yards when Book has started, for this season he's 71 of 86 for 753 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Outstanding.
That's the efficiency that Notre Dame has been lacking.
But then you look at the flip side of that coin. Ian Book is not. He is often want to criticism because of how well this Notre Dame offense has played. But if you look at it against Virginia Tech, he was 1 for 7 on throws longer than 20 yards.
Right.
It was that one long ball to Chris Fink for 56 yards.
Yeah.
1 for 7, not very good. It's overall on passes longer than 20 yards this season. He's 6 for 19 with 132 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he has not been able to air the ball out, and maybe he fixes some of those issues this week in practice, and we see a lot of long balls tomorrow. But it's really those short 10-yard, 15-yard routes.
You need those 15-yard routes.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need those 50, 60-yard plays. We're seeing that Dexter Williams can pick up the slack if you're looking for some big plays. You don't need to have 3 or 4 or 5, 60 or 70-yard passing plays in every game. It would be nice to have a few extra 25 and 30-yard plays. But generally, he's hitting his targets over the middles. He's hitting the targets in the sidelines. He's been able to find Miles Boykin, and Boykin's been key time and time again.
Yeah, Boykin had another big game on Saturday, 117 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. That's the second week in a row that he's been the leading receiver for the Irish and a favorite target of Book. Book he completed 6 passes to 6 different Notre Dame receivers last week, which is different as opposed to the first 2 starts where he distributed the ball to 10 different Irish receivers. But again, even in his worst game, he still threw for 2 touchdowns, and that we talked about his escapability last week. That came up big in that third down play on the Boykin touchdown connection.
Yeah, and he's currently on pace for school records in both completion percentage and passing efficiency at 73% and 170 plus passing efficiency.
Is that good?
Last I checked, that was pretty good. But it puts him in the same category as Jimmy Clausen, so I'll allow you to make your own decisions about, you know, where that puts Ian Book. But I think that this is a win that really solidifies Notre Dame as a college football playoff contender and not a pretender.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. In the college football playoff, it's hard to sit here after half the season and imagine Notre Dame in the college football playoff, because when they've been in contention the past couple of years, everything has sputtered in November. So I think we're going to be extra cautious. But how do you see the chances for the Irish now, 6-0, number 5 in the country?
This is the best Notre Dame team I have seen in a long time. I think this is a better team than we saw in 2012 simply because of the offensive difference Notre Dame has. You look at the running game, Dexter Williams has been outstanding. The offensive line has stood strong ever since those first couple of weeks, which were, you know, a little bit worrisome, but since then they've looked really, really good. And then the passing game. This is where the difference lies. You know, you're no longer relying on Brandon Wimbush, who's been shaky at best with his passes. You're working with a guy in Ian Book who is really, really, really good. He's up there with the top quarterbacks in college football. He's shown it 3 weeks in a row now. I think I have a lot of faith in Book moving forward. The running game looks good. There's not a team on the schedule that I'm actually worried about. There could be some games that are surprises, but there's not a game on the schedule I'm very worried about.
There you see on the screen, 63% chance ESPN gives Notre Dame to make the playoff.
That is a really interesting thing that you just said. There's not a single game on the schedule you're still worried about.
No.
Pittsburgh, a team that has upset a college football playoff the last 2 years.
We'll get to the prediction later.
A Navy team that always plays Notre Dame close. Going to USC at the end of the year. These are games that worry me. I think that Notre Dame will win. I think that Notre Dame has the capability to go 12-0, but you cannot possibly sit back and say Notre Dame's schedule the rest of the way is easy. I think that's a gross understatement.
I have been very cautious up to this point. I didn't think Notre Dame would go undefeated to start the season. I look ahead at the rest of the schedule, and you mentioned teams like USC on the road. That's not going to be a cupcake game by any means, but it's not a team ranked in the top 25. Notre Dame has played well on the road. They show they can win in front of, you know, big crowds in Virginia Tech. That game does not really worry me. Northwestern, that's not a huge road game. This is not a huge road opponent. You look at teams like Florida State, they've played really poorly this year. Pittsburgh's a team that has challenged Notre Dame in the past. I think the offense is going to be way too much this week for Pittsburgh to handle.
I actually tend to agree with Rooney on this one. I don't think the schedule poses any major threats to Notre Dame the rest of the way. I think Notre Dame's biggest opponent throughout the season is themselves. They have to get up for every single game, especially this one on Saturday. Some people are calling this a trap game because Pitt has, as you mentioned, has been kryptonite for other playoff contenders. But I do not see any team, at least talent-wise, outside of USC, but they're not well coached.
No,
outside of USC that can really challenge this roster.
I don't think that any of those teams on Notre Dame's schedule that remain are more talented or better than Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame is the better team in the rest of their remaining games. They will be favored in their remaining games. Yep. But that does not mean that any of those games are going to be easy. Notre Dame might make it look easy, but whatever. This comes down to Notre Dame's preparations, Notre Dame's dedication, and Notre Dame's ability to finish ball games.
I would like to go back to Johnny's point about Pittsburgh, though. If you remember back in 2012, that Pittsburgh game was awfully
we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it, no doubt. But I do think that Notre Dame, the rest of the way, is going to be favored in every single game.
Yeah, they should be.
No, they will be. And the big thing now is who do they knock out? And if they do falter, does it matter which game it is? And does a one-loss Irish team make the playoff?
I think Notre Dame has gone past the point of they can lose a game. I think that all of the games on their schedule that were losable in order to make the college football playoff, Michigan, Stanford, Virginia Tech, they've won those games.
Yep.
Good for you. You've won those games. You got some big wins under your belt. Now you can't lose. But you look at all the other teams that are in the college football playoff hunt. We're going to call it Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, West Virginia, and Notre Dame. There's a myriad of other teams that could probably make a case, you know, considering on how everyone else falls. But those are the 6 undefeated teams in the top 6 right now. But if you look at it, in the history of the college football playoff, 3 teams have finished the season undefeated going into the playoff. In the history of the playoff, in all 4 years, only 3 teams have done it.
Someone's going to lose. Multiple teams.
Stuff is going to happen. Georgia plays 4 straight ranked opponents in the next 4 games. Alabama still has to go to LSU. 2 home SEC games, the top 25.
LSU, who just lost on the road against Florida last week.
Lots of tough games for all of these contenders, except for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's the only team that has really put the brunt of their schedule behind them, and they just have to take care of business the rest of the way.
Yep. I think there are 2 teams on there that I'm not sure about. Clemson does not have a really tough game aside from NC State. That's a game they're going to have to look at. a possible trap game for them.
And the ACC championship game.
The ACC championship game, which we'll get to in a second, but OSU as well. I think Ohio State may be a team good enough to go undefeated. Now, the other question is Alabama so good and is Georgia so good they're going to run through the rest of their schedule? Because if they are, that's a real possibility. I would not give it higher than maybe a 5% chance the other 4 teams, along with Notre Dame, end up going undefeated into their championship games, but that's a theoretical possibility. There could be those top 5 teams that are just so good that they all end up undefeated. In that case, who's out? Because if Georgia, who, as you mentioned, have 4 straight ranked opponents, and if they play in the SEC championship game and they play Alabama and they're 1-2, does a Georgia team with 4 ranked wins and the only team that's lost, are they out? I don't think so.
Hey,
that's a playoff game, I think.
Let's get past Pittsburgh this weekend. And speaking of the Panthers, as we transition our conversation to the game on Saturday at 2:30, Ellen Geyer has our 3 keys to the game.
I'm Ellen Geyer, and these are 3 keys to this week's game. One, Notre Dame needs to be able to play a full game of football. Last week, the Irish came out strong, but let the Hokies stay in the game and went into the locker room with -2 rushing yards and converted on only 2 of their 7 offensive drives. They only had a 1-point lead. The Irish team that came out of the locker room was entirely different. In the second half, Notre Dame converted on 4 of their 6 offensive drives and outscored the Hokies 28-7. They left Blacksburg with an impressive 22-point win. If the Irish want to win against Pittsburgh this week, they're going to have to come out of the locker room strong and play hard for all 4 quarters. 2. Notre Dame needs to continue to play aggressive defense against the rushing game. Pittsburgh has 2 strong running backs, and last week their offense rushed for 265 yards. The Notre Dame defense needs to continue to hold strong on the line and have good coverage if they want to limit the impact of the Pittsburgh offense this week. 3. The Notre Dame offense needs to continue to keep its foot on the gas. Ian Book has effectively made this Irish team into a viable college football playoff contender. With a completion rate of 73.3%, 9 touchdowns, and 887 yards, Book has carried the Notre Dame offense. Although the Pittsburgh Panthers come in at 3-3, they have a very strong mentality on offense and defense, and they posted a very good overtime win against a good Syracuse team last week. Additionally, Pittsburgh has proven itself to be a team that can upset ranked opponents over the last 2 seasons. Last year, they upset Miami, and the year before that, they upset Clemson. Notre Dame will need to take this game seriously and come out with a solid mentality if they want to post another win this week. I'm Ellen Geyer, and that's 3 keys to this week's game.
All right, Alan, thanks so much. Pittsburgh, by the way, has played 2 ranked teams this year, and the combined score in those games, both losses, 96-20.
That's not good.
It's certainly not good. That's true. So the Panthers come into Notre Dame Stadium a bit battered, although they come off a big overtime win against Syracuse last Saturday. What do we think of this team?
Well, the game versus Syracuse was an interesting one. They came big in the running game. Kadri Olesen had a really big game, nearly 200 yards, added a couple of touchdowns. It mostly comes from the rushing game, and that's where this Pittsburgh offense comes from. Their starting quarterback, Kenny Pickett, sophomore, he's not that effective. He averages actually under 150 yards in passing per game. The passing numbers on the whole front for Pittsburgh are kind of weak. So it's all going to come down to the rushing game. The rushing game versus Syracuse was very good. It was an overtime win over Syracuse. I generally think Syracuse is a pretty good team. We've seen them play well earlier this season. So yep. I was a little surprised, I'm going to be honest, that Pittsburgh knocked off Syracuse. But I don't think that Syracuse is a major threat this week. If Notre Dame plays okay and they play well, they're not going to have a problem.
Pitt is led by their senior running back cores. You just brought up Olesen and Darren Hall make up that backfield for the Panthers. Olesen averages 6.4 yards per rush.
It's nearly 100 yards a game.
This is a pretty solid backfield for sure.
It's a top 40 rushing offense. Yeah. But if you look at total offense, they're sub 100. They're really not a very good offensive team, and overall, they're around 90th in the country. So this is a team that Notre Dame should beat. They're 21-point favorites.
No question.
But you look at the ways in which that this game is difficult. 2012, Notre Dame had just traveled to Norman, Oklahoma. They knocked off a 3rd-ranked Sooners team, and they came back, and they needed 3 overtimes to beat Pittsburgh.
And a missed field goal.
They needed a missed field goal and a miracle fumble.
It was like a 29-yard field goal, too. We're not talking about a deep field goal versus Pittsburgh either.
They needed some luck. And so you look at the way that That game is similar to this one. And Jack Swarbrick, this is a little bit, non-football related, but Jack Swarbrick has talked about this multiple times. Teams who come into Notre Dame Stadium want to play Notre Dame this week because it's midterm week. Alohi Gilman talked about he had 3 tests this week going in Monday through Wednesday. I mean, we've all been studying. We have a lot of work to do this weekend at Notre Dame. Even the football players have a lot of work to do. And you look at, Gilman talked about he was up till 2 a.m. most nights this week studying. And so this is a Notre Dame team that has to deal with a lot of mental blocks, not only on the field, but off the field. So it's midterm week, 2 huge games, and you got to follow it up. You're a 21-point favorite against Pitt. Lots of things lead to this being a trap game. So Notre Dame needs to come out and set the tone early.
That's
if they want to take control of it.
That's key. You talk about setting the tone early. We saw setting the tone early with Wimbush. Interestingly, we really haven't seen it with Book.
Not necessarily. At Virginia Tech, they scored on their first drive, marched down the field on their first drive, scored a touchdown.
Going back to Wake Forest, that was a slower start. Stanford, Notre Dame didn't get a big score until later in the first quarter. So he hasn't done it the same way Wimbush did. Wimbush had a touchdown on the first drive in each and every game there. So that was a really strong start in every game from Wimbush. We have not yet seen that in Book. Book, of course, has played way better overall, but when we look at that first drive, I agree with John. They have to come out to a touchdown. You said that it happened versus Virginia Tech. Let's see it again this week.
And Pitt, as you mentioned, has one of the worst defenses in college football, and they just lost their leading tackler, senior captain, which is a huge blow for this defense, which is already battered right now. And they averaged 32 points scored against. That's not good. Notre Dame, in 3 games under Ian Book, has scored 45 points a game. So this is a big-time mismatch for the Panthers.
It is. You look at numbers, 105th rushing defense in the country. They are ranked 64th in passing defense. I think we're going to see a lot of rushes from Dexter Williams. Would not be surprised to see 200-plus yards. He's been in excess of 170 in each of his last 2 games. Would not be surprised to see him put up another 170, 200-plus yards this week. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised to see this first team taken out and put the backups and third-string guys in if it gets ugly later in the game.
Now, it's no secret that Notre Dame, as a double-digit home favorite, has a terrible record against the spread for all of our degenerate friends out there. So do you think they exercise those demons and they score more than a 21-point victory on Saturday?
Boy, I sure hope so. But I think that the way that this game is going to come down to, for Pittsburgh, the passing game. I think that if they're going to put up a fight, Kenny Pickett has to have a good game. I don't think that Notre Dame is going to allow much on the ground. They're a top 5 defense, as we've talked about. Notre Dame is the 40th best rushing defense in the country, and they're very good against the run. So I don't think that Pittsburgh is going to be able to establish the run game the way they have in the past. So I think that Kenny Pickett is going to have to step up and throw the ball well for Pittsburgh. We'll see if he can do that. On the flip side for Notre Dame, I think that Ian Book has to be able to do it against pressure. I don't know how much pressure Pittsburgh's going to be able to put on him, but if you look at Ian Book's stats against the blitz, he has a sub 50% completion percentage and just 179 yards. He struggles when he's put under pressure, and that was one of the things we talked about when he was made a starter. How is his decision-making, especially when he's under pressure? So I think that for Pittsburgh, on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to have to get after Ian Book. On the offensive side of the ball, Kenny Pickett's going to have to throw it. I don't know if either of those things can happen, and so I think that Notre Dame's going to win pretty handily.
Yeah, I think Wimbush probably plays the entire 4th quarter. If Pitt wants to spring the upset, what are your keys?
Again, I think you mentioned a lot of the big keys to this game. I think they're going to have to get some big yardage out of that running duo of Olesen and Hall. If they're able to get those yards, they're able to put up 200, 250 yards. All of a sudden, they're probably getting within striking distance. Their defense has to come up big, though. I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, in that same conversation, let's get your prediction to the game.
I've got Notre Dame 52-14. This is the biggest win I've had Notre Dame winning this season. I'm confident in Book. I'm confident in this offense. And I'm also confident in the defense. I don't think it's close this week.
I cannot believe that you just picked the exact score that I was going to pick.
No.
I was going to pick 52-14.
Wait.
So I
don't
write down my predictions.
Oh, okay.
I don't write it either.
But I was going to say 52-14, but I'm going to switch it up.
Okay.
I think that Notre Dame's defense, they're 15th nationally in pass efficiency. They're 12th in the country in passing touchdowns allowed, only 5. So I don't think that Pickett's going to be able to do anything through the air. And I think that Notre Dame's rush defense is good enough to stop Pittsburgh from scoring a touchdown. So I'm going to go even bolder. I'm going to go Notre Dame 49, Pittsburgh 6. 2 field goals for Pittsburgh.
Ooh, not close.
Wow, no mercy. Pittsburgh, yeah, they're going to have a tough time Saturday night at Notre Dame Stadium. Remember, it's one of those 2:30 kickoff games on NBC. For Austin Rooney and John Horlander, I'm Johnny Soper. Thanks for watching Shamrock Sports, and enjoy the game, everyone.
all night.